The breaking news, the sad news that South Africa is facing today is the passing at the age of 81 of Winnie Mandela. Joining me in studio now is Aldrin Sampear, who's been talking to me for a while, and we're also now joined by our foreign editor and acting political editor, Sophie Mokoena. Thanks very much for joining us. Sophie, you've lived through a lot of the time of Winnie Mandela as an activist, and I just wonder, from when you were a little girl and up until now, what are your immediate thoughts and memories of her contribution over time?
Well, she did a lot in terms of the struggle. You'd recall that this is a woman who kept the fires burning when former President Nelson Mandela was in prison, ensuring that there was a family and the home is there for the children, but also continued to ensure that the ANC was at the center and in memory of many South Africans. You know that she suffered a lot. She continued with the struggle when the former president was in prison, but after 1994 again, she had a stint in government and there were challenges there, but she didn't abandon the struggle, and she continued to fight for women issues. And the last time I spoke to her was during the voter registration a few weeks ago. I went to her house in Soweto because I was told that she is going to go to the registration center to check her details, and she was going to be accompanied by the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa. And I spoke to her. I asked her about her views. After so many years, she has been involved in the struggle, but now under a new dispensation. And she said to me she was happy and she was looking forward to cast her ballot next year, but unfortunately that was not to be. But she also indicated that she was happy with the new ANC leadership. She was hopeful that things will be better. And from there, when she was supposed to go home after visiting the polling station or the registration center, she was supposed to go home. She refused. She refused. She said, "No, I'm going with you, Comrade President," that is Cyril Ramaphosa, to Maponya Mall to go and mobilize South Africans, because I'm hopeful that things will be better. When she arrived at Maponya Mall, because she had challenges because of the knee challenges, she went to Nando's. She sat there waiting for the ANC president to finish his walkabout, and I went to her to just have a chat with her. She was happy, and she spoke about the fact that she's happy to be here, even though she can't join Ramaphosa on the walkabouts, but she's happy that she is there, and she is there to support the ANC president, Cyril Ramaphosa.
So now, when her story is being written, a tagline that's going to be attached is going to be "wife of former President Nelson Mandela," and sharing his name, that would come. But we can't forget that she was iconic in her own right. I mean, even before she married this man, she was the first social worker to graduate in South Africa and turned down a scholarship to go to America to work at Baragwanath. So perhaps it's a little unfair to tag her with Mandela all the time, when actually from day one she was always a woman in her own right.
Yes, Winnie was an extraordinary woman in terms of her vision, particularly on women issues and the country, her vision for the country. She felt that she has to serve the nation. Yes, she ate where she ate. All of us, we do make mistakes, but she was very committed to the struggle and to work for the South African public. And for me, it's no surprise that she was doing this kind of work, because she really liked to serve the people. And even when she was sent to Brantford, the system removed her from Soweto around the people that she knew, but took her to Brantford with the hope that perhaps she will abandon the struggle. She didn't, even though people in Brantford, some of them were very scared. I come from Free State, Frankfurt, not Brantford. In those days, Free State was hell. You couldn't do anything there. You couldn't be an activist freely. And you can imagine when you leave from Soweto going to the Free State, everybody was scared to associate with her. But she did find a way to ensure that she interact with people in terms of self-help projects, gardening, sewing, and all that in between, educating them about the struggle. It speaks to someone who was very, very dedicated to the struggle.
And she was committed to the party, her party, the ANC.
Certainly.
You've covered a lot of these conferences, and I'm always struck by many people enter a room, but whenever she arrives, the room has a different energy and praise.
No, it's the aura that she carries with her wherever she goes. You look at the ANC's, was it the elective conference as well as the policy conference? When Winnie Mandela walks in, the cameras automatically just shift, and the focus is on her. And quite strangely, though, she always has this ability to bring together battling factions, because I remember a picture where it was Ramaphosa on the one hand and Jacob Zuma on the other hand, and remember it was during the elective conference that the tensions were so high that you'd hardly see a picture of these two men standing together, but there she was right in the middle. The same thing happened during the birthday celebration in Cape Town, remember, where you had Ramaphosa there and you had Julius Malema there, when Julius Malema, remember that during that year in Parliament, kept on pounding on and on that Cyril Ramaphosa is a murderer because of what had happened in Marikana. And speaking of Marikana, it was Winnie Mandela who said that I will take you to Marikana. And again, it is a wish that she had that hasn't happened, Bamso.
Yes, remember when the top 6 visited her at her house, I asked her, Winnie, are you still going to take the president to Marikana? And you'd recall that during that campaign, when Ramaphosa was campaigning to become ANC president in the Western Cape, and in the Eastern Cape, he did confront that question whether he would go to Marikana. He agreed. He said he would. He even indicated that you'd recall that Mewini has indicated that she wants to accompany me to Marikana. And I asked her at that time, I remember the whole house froze because people were like asking this question, and everybody was not comfortable, but I posed the question because that was the right thing to do, because this is something that she really wanted to do. And incidentally, she was talking to me when she said she would take Cyril Ramaphosa to Marikana 3 years ago during the Women's League commemoration of the Women's Day in Soweto at her restaurant. That's what she told me, and there was no way I could have forgotten those words or that statement. And it is for that reason I wanted to find out from her whether that wish still stands. And Ramaphosa nodded, saying yes, as soon as Mama is ready, I will go with her to Marikana. But for example, during Quentin Dlozi Mbuyiseni's party inauguration, she was there, an ANC leader, an ANC veteran, surrounded with by mostly the EFF guys, but she was there. That's the kind of person she was. She was able to interact with anyone, irrespective of color, creed, or political inclination.
And I think it speaks to the Winnie Mandela during even the struggle, because there was no-go zone for her.
Yes.
Even when there were police, even then when there were attacks, there was nothing that would say that Winnie would not enter this area. Even when an area is being cordoned off by police, she would confront them. And to this very day, that's what she's been doing.
And she's the only person who could ask hard questions. You'd recall that 3 years ago, the last comprehensive interview that she did, it is with the SABC. It was myself and Mahlatsi Gallens, who was then the deputy political editor. I went to her house. She wanted to speak to me, but I said, let's go, Mahlatsi. It was a comprehensive interview that we will show our viewers very soon, where she was talking about Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma.
Yeah.
You know very well the incident, where I asked her about the relationship that she has with Thabo Mbeki and that time President Jacob Zuma, and her saying Polokwane was a disaster in a sense that she had warned the ANC leadership that if the tension between former President Thabo Mbeki and the then President Zuma continue, the ANC will find itself in a very difficult situation, and thereafter it was cope. And her saying to me, I remember very well saying, then I asked Thabo, what wabuteni nilwa kangaka no Zuma? And Thabo nodded and said, Awumazi mama. And then at some point in time she went to President Zuma then, and then the same question to President Zuma, why are you fighting like this? And then that was the same response that she got from President Zuma. You don't know that guy. So it speaks to a kind of a woman who wanted to see her organization grow and the unity in the organization, and she would do everything in her power to ensure that the ANC was united. But also generally she was able to interact with anybody, and I think the film that's currently in the cinemas around her life and time really speaks to who Winnie Mandela was and what she was about.
Yeah, that's from that insert that I told you about earlier, and it's quite captivating. And most people who have actually watched the movie or watched the documentary are saying that the documentary is so great in a sense that the producers and the directors of the documentary have taken a step back and allowed Mam Winnie Mandela to tell her own story. And even in that snippet, I think it's her daughter or granddaughter who speaks about this role that Mam Winnie has always wanted to play, but she's always been vilified. And there's always been this negative propaganda around what Winnie Mandela stood for.
So, there's going to be lots of relationships that are going to be discussed, and one that was considered a remarkable love story was the one with her and her former husband, Nelson Mandela. And then it became estranged, but even to the last day, somehow they were still all in one fold, weren't they?
Yes, I remember when Madiba turned 90, I was invited at Kunu, among the very few media houses invited. I think it was CNN, Sunday Times, and SABC. We went there, and you remember the famous picture where you have Mam Graça Machel and also Winnie Mandela at the house in Kunu. It really demonstrates the relationship they had. It wasn't about only a husband and wife, but also a comrade, a friend, a person that she knew too well, and she was not prepared to part with a friend or a comrade, and they continued to interact. You saw during the funeral of former President Nelson Mandela, she was there all the way. When Madiba was in hospital, every day she went to the hospital in Pretoria, and up to the end she was there, and it speaks to their relationship was too huge. I mean, it was a comrade, a brother, a father, a friend.
I wonder though, Mam Sophie, just looking into, so Nelson Mandela is now released from prison. There's of course now this fallout between herself and between Matikizela Mandela and her husband, who's now set to become president, the first president of the first democratically elected president of the country. And there is now all of a sudden this divorce, and they have to go through this divorce. Do you at all know what strain she took probably during that time, if at all? It
was very difficult. I covered the court case. I was there in court in Johannesburg. It was supposed to last for a week or so. It didn't last for days because of the strain. I would remember very well when Madiba said, even the universe will never reconcile us. I could see the strain or the pain in Mam Winnie. And the next day, there was a out of court settlement. I remember very well Advocate Khomotso Moroka on the other hand, and then the senior counsel also who represented Winnie the next day saying the case will not continue. It was very difficult. It was very, very difficult. Not only for Winnie but also for Madiba, because every day Madiba will get into that court and he will sit there. You could see he was troubled. One day I remember when I looked at Madiba, I had to crack a joke with him before the court starts by saying, Tata, every time you invite people to your house, but you don't invite us women journalists. And he laughed. And 3 days after, I got a call where he invited SABC female journalists to have a dinner with him. Because I was trying, you know, these are senior people, and you could see that it was indeed a difficult time. So what do you do as a young journalist then? You find a way just to try and find out and check whether how is this going to pan out. And that was the only question I could ask, why you don't invite us as a female journalist. And we went there, we were many, and we had dinner, and it was a few days after that you know, difficult time of the court case.
Over the years, so many people tried to get close to her, so many journalists tried to get into her, and some, sadly, with malicious intent. And I guess it spoke to just kind of how revered, or what her role was, that everybody wanted a piece of Winnie Mandela.
Yes, indeed. But, you know, as a journalist, newsmakers decide. You know, there are people. When you are a journalist, people just trust you and they open up. It can be issues related to your work as a journalist or a private life. Perhaps one was fortunate that people like Winnie Mandela, former President Mandela, and many others were able to interact with one. Perhaps as a female African journalist who started this journey of reporting on politics, it was strange. It was not fashionable to do so, but I was there all the time, pushing and doorstop after doorstop, and then you learn to know a person much better. It is for that reason all the time I was kept posted in terms of what was happening. Like I indicated to you, on Friday she was at the church, at the Methodist church, and apparently when she went home she had flu. She was taken to the doctor and then finally to the hospital, and she passed on. The family knew very well that any minute she can ask them to call me because she wants to say something, and that's what she was all about. The only thing I regret, she had requested that, and Aldrin must take a blame, that I organize a debate of women discussing the future of South Africa, and it must be women across the board. And my producer didn't.
I can't take the blame. Yes, I can attest to that. We spoke about it earlier on, but I'm not taking the blame. But I just quickly want to speak about Mum Sophie's relationship with Winnie Mandela as well. I remember it was the NGC, was it 2012 if I'm not mistaken? It was the NGC that was taking place at Gallagher Estate in Midrand. And I had not known Mum Sophie that well at the time, but I just known that she's a great journalist. But we all wanted to get a bite from Winnie Mandela. She was walking from one of the halls there, and the bodyguards refused, and everybody refused. And then Mum Winnie then looked across, and amongst all the reporters who were there, then said, "Sophie, how are you? How are you? I'm Winnie. How are you? How are you? Let's just get one bite quick." Being the journalist and Sophie. So certainly quite a relationship that you've had with her. But just quickly want to speak about the struggle of the black female reporter. And Mum Winnie has always been about the struggle of the black female in the country. And we look back at what happened at the ANC's elective conference in 1997, Mahikeng, where she is about to be nominated to stand for deputy president against then candidate Jacob Zuma, who was also standing to become deputy president. And there was something that was happening, and she was then called to the podium. And Thabo Mbeki, she had asked for a few minutes to go and consult with those who were supporting her. And Thabo Mbeki, then the president of the ANC, then said that we will not allow that, we will not give you those few minutes. And then she turned around and said that, Comrade Thabo, I think she said, I can see what's happening here. It's okay. And went down and she sat down. Take us through that moment.
Well, clearly, you know, the issue of slate politics in the ANC has been there, very subtle. Clearly, there was a faction that believed that perhaps the time has arrived for Winnie to lead the ANC, perhaps as a deputy president of the ANC. On the other hand, this thing of lobbying, the group was there and they felt very strong that the former president, Jacob Zuma, should be the deputy president as part of trade-offs to try and manage the situation in KZN and ensure that the peace, the relative peace that was there in KZN is strengthened. It was a strategic move. And so that was the situation. That was the situation. But as a shrewd politician, she could see, you know, what was happening. And it is for that reason she took a back seat. And the sad thing is that when I spoke to her at the conference in Nasrec, the last conference, the last soundbite, I asked her about how women have regressed, because when you look at the outcome of the Nasrec conference, indeed women lost and they suffered a huge humiliation.
What did she say?
Very angry. She was hurt. She was very, very angry because now you only have one woman in the top 6, the deputy Nohal, you know, and because for the Deputy Secretary General, you had 2 women.
Pause for a second, because we're going to go to Mill Park Hospital now, where a press briefing is underway. That's where Winnie Mandela died in front of her family.